So some of the statistics from my crossing. We sailed approximately 4,200 miles. We were on the water for 49 days, 6.5 hours. By car, I traveled 2,038 miles and 27 hours in the car. By airplane, I traveled 6,500 miles, and it took 22 hours to get to Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. I'm just going to start showing my pictures. There's 360 of them. If you have questions, please ask them. These first couple are not in order. This is the harbor at Las Palmas. That's on board Synthesis, North Sea 27. That's a boat that was just out in our harbor.
Is this where you ended up or where you started?
Where we started.
Okay.
Canary Islands.
These boats, most of these boats were in that harbor to make the crossing to the Caribbean. I don't know if you guys know it or not, but in the Atlantic Ocean, the cruisers start off, say, in New York in May, cross over to England, mess around in the Mediterranean, come out to the Canaries, outfit their boats, go south to Cape Verde, head west across the trades, and then pop up into the Caribbean. And they keep doing that. And it's a series of cruising races. And they just keep doing it round and round and round in circles. We were here about the time these guys were all arriving. So one of the first things that happened was we got kicked off the dock and had to anchor out. I found out later why we did this. Meet George Purifoy, 60 years old. When he was a fighter pilot in Korea, he was on a night interdiction sortie. It went sour on him. Things happened. He got, I don't know exactly what happened, but he made a promise to himself that before he was 65, he would cross the Atlantic solo. The boat in the background is Synthesis. It's a North Sea 27, cutaway full keel. I think she weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 pounds. She's a stout boat. I know for a fact that the hull, right on the bow, back about 4 feet and down about 3, the hull is about an inch thick. Most sailboats in that spot are maybe a quarter inch. I know because I put 47 layers of glass in a hole that he put in the boat the first day he launched it. So one of the things about George is he was a really bad tour guide. So he took me to a nude beach.
Nude. You said nude.
Nude. This is a nude beach. This is what he showed me.
The beach itself is nude.
Okay. This is the part of the harbor in Las Palmas. Needless to say, no nudes. We spent, in the first 2 weeks I was there, I was in Las Palmas about 2 weeks before we set sail. And our daily routine was to get up in the morning, get in the rubber raft, go into town, and I have a picture someplace in here of the place that we went. And we'd row in and get 2 backpacks full of food and come back to the boat and put it away. This is a naval station inside the harbor. The building on the right is like an everything store. It was a hardware store. It was a food store. It was where we went to make telephone calls. It was where we went to eat. where we got clothes and souvenirs, everything. I mean, they just had everything in there. Almost all the cars were diesel. It smelled really good. These, like I said, a lot of these boats were getting ready for the cruising race.
What year is this?
1988, November of 88. This little boat was down from England, so no boat too small. There was a boat in the harbor. It was an aluminum sloop. Its name was Just Tin. And it had a little pram that he pulled behind it, and it was called Just Tin Case. That's the bar. Kaya Manzi, she was up from South Africa, getting ready to do the crossing. On her way to get food. At night at the harbor, sunsets. You guys have probably all experienced sunsets on the open water, and there's just nothing like it. That guy was getting bait fish for the fishermen in the morning. This is the entrance to, at the time, I don't know about now, but at the time that was the second largest botanic gardens in the world. The largest at that time was in Los Angeles. We did a tour of that on this tour boat, on this tour bus. Toured the island, went to the gardens, some of the gardens. It was really kind of cool. A lot of cactus, evergreens. We went in this church. The church had these beautiful stained glass windows around the top. Really a nice church, and I think that church was built in something like 1600, 15 or 1600. They had a lot of really nice railings and buildings like this. The town was very clean. Our tour bus. We went up, the island is volcanic, and we went up to the top, and there's an observation place up there.
I got a question.
Yeah.
What determined the fact that you started the crossing in there?
It's the traditional place to start. Any one of the Canary Islands are appropriate. One of the books that I read on the crossing, I read 13 books coming across. One of the books I read was Christopher Columbus's log. And in the preface to that, it tells you exactly how to make a crossing. So you leave Portugal, the Mediterranean, England, come down to the Canaries, supply, drop down to Cape Verde, supply, go across the Trades, and pop up into the Trades. That's how it was done. That's how Columbus did it. That's how everybody does it. That's not how we did it.
Claude, and the boat owner been in the Mediterranean?
What's that?
The boat owner, have they been in the Mediterranean?
Yeah,
Back?
he went across. He left and went across in May. Right at my birthday, he left from City Island, New York. Went out to the Verrazano Straits. Went across. He had a rough crossing going across. he was about halfway across. He got into a storm in the North Atlantic that was blowing so hard and raining so hard that it actually flattened the seas. And he was going so fast with bare poles that he threw out a drogue to slow himself down. He goofed up, and when he threw the drogue out, it hooked a cleat on the back of the boat. So when he was going down, he was going sideways instead of directly downwind. And he tells the story that he was just down below, hanging on for dear life. And at a point, the wind going over the mast was so strong that it was making St. Elmo's fire down on the compression post inside. Now he's down there, and George is a very intelligent person. And he's down there and he's saying, God, I'd like to touch that. God, I'd like to touch that. But there's nobody here to pull me off if I get hooked on it. And so he didn't touch it. And I thought about it a lot after he told me that story. And I would have swiped at it or done something if I had that kind of curiosity. George was very safety minded. He is an engineering psychologist. His job is to interface humans with machines. He made a simulator for the shale oil drag lines up in Canada, where just the line that pulls the bucket in is worth $1 million. These things can't be shut down. So he designed and built a simulator to train these operators so that they could just walk into the seat and operate these things. He did stuff for the military in cockpits of fighters. He came up with a procedure to don personal protection equipment in case of a chemical fire for soldiers, and how to put that stuff on as fast as possible. So every detail of this boat was meticulous. We had spares for everything. I know that he's been talking about spares for his boat and all this stuff. We had everything that we needed when we needed it, except for one thing. We'll get to that in a minute. So we did this tour, and it was a lot of fun. It was kind of a drizzly day when we got to the top of the mountain. And you can see the winds blowing pretty dang hard. And you can't really see it in this picture, but right about here, there's a car that had missed this corner. And I swear to God, the windows were real low, and you can look over and it was straight down. And this bus driver he was going fast. It was kind of frightening. Get to the good stuff.
So is this in December?
November. Traditionally, the hurricane season ends the beginning of November. It's not true anymore. It's getting later and later every year. This is the morning that we took off. We broke a lot of traditions on this thing. Traditionally, a sailor will not leave harbor on a Sunday. We left on a Sunday. George was getting frustrated. He'd been on the boat since May. Either camping out in the Mediterranean or Portugal or England or down here in the Canaries. And he was frustrated. He wanted to get home. And the problem was there was a storm front up by England, and instead of the wind blowing south past the Canaries, it was blowing north, which meant that we were going to have to sail on the wind if we left any sooner than we did. And he just got frustrated. He just threw his hands up and said, "We're leaving today, and I don't care." So we spent the first 3 days of my ocean passage going between the Canary Islands and the coast of Africa, back and forth. It wasn't until the 4th day that we couldn't see either the volcanoes on Las Palmas or the Loma Light in Africa. We were still sailing mostly on the wind, and that prompted the next decision that we made that is not normal. Instead of going straight down to Cape Verde, we cut the corner and came across on a diagonal. For me, as it turns out later, was a good thing, because it went away. Okay. So here we are. We're heading out. We're heading out of the harbor, and
You're honored.
okay. So we're heading out of the harbor, and this is a derelict boat just sitting out there. And as ocean freighters go, that was pretty darn small when we burned out. We went out about this far, and we spent about an hour with mask and scuba gear and fins, and we tried to scrape barnacles off the bottom of this boat. It didn't work. You can't with just fins and stuff get enough pressure to get a barnacle off the bottom of the boat.
Didn't know
So synthesis sailed about like this almost all the time when she's on the wind. And I'd also like to introduce you to this guy right here, that brown thing sticking up.
Yeah.
That's George Jr. He did all of our steering for us. It's a monitored wind vane steering system, and all these lines that are connected to the tiller are how it steers. So that paddle, when you're going along, you set your sails, you get everything set up the way you want it to, right? The boat's sailing, and you adjust that paddle till it's standing straight up. As the paddle gets blown over by the wind, and when it changes direction, through a series of lines and pulleys, goes down to a little rudder, about 6 inches, 8 inches deep, wide, and about 3 feet long. And it turns that, and that's the leverage that moves the tiller through those lines. And George does most of the work on the boat. Most of the time you're just sitting there. And it works downwind, it works upwind, it works with any sail configuration as long as the boat is in balance. First days at sea, we always had on the foredeck 3 sails. Storm jib, working jib, and Genoa were all on deck all at the same time. They were all fastened to the head fitting. So all you had to do is drop one, rehank the next one, and put the halyard on it and put it up. George had a habit of waiting until I fell asleep and would come and knock on the aft cabin and say, "Claude, we need to make a head sail change." I have a lot of defects in my life. I can't see, I can't smell, I can't taste, but I can see after dark.
Oh.
I never once needed the spreader lights to make a head sail change or work after dark. Starlight, when you're out away from city lights and everything, is extremely bright. And even on cloudy nights, there's enough ambient light from the moon and everything else that you really can see a lot. the Dodger. He had that built while we were at City Island. A lot of our gear got stashed there that we'd want to have during the day, our cameras and everything else. Both of us had Nikon waterproof cameras, and unfortunately, some of my best pictures were taken with his camera. I'm up doing a head sail change during the day. Looks like we got one reef in the main.
What's the temperature?
The ocean on our crossing was about 78 degrees day and night. So in the daytime it was warm, and at night 78 degrees without the sun is pretty cool. You'll see a picture of me on night watch here in a little bit.
Is that your reef?
Hmm?
You reefed the main there? Is that what?
Yeah. We had 3 reefs on his mainsail. We got 2 reefs in here. I can tell because here's this one is the first reef, and that one's the second reef.
What was the normal wind speed you'd see, and then what were the highest winds you'd see
Oh, boy.
in the trades?
The lowest we saw, absolute 0.
Mm-hmm.
The highest, I don't think we ever saw anything above 30 knots. I will say that I had an extremely easy crossing.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely easy. It couldn't have been easier.
And
It really
the
couldn't.
general normal trades flowing, what was that about?
The trades, we only got into the trades for about 2 weeks. Actually, it was only about a week. And the problem is you'll see a big blue and white sail. That was a reacher. And it didn't work downwind. And without a spinnaker or something to stabilize the boat downwind. And I have a series of pictures in here. When we were in the trades and actually doing the downwind thing, it was like this.
Mm-hmm.
All day long, all night long. And I lacked that much of being able to brace crossways in the cockpit of a North Sea 27.
Yep.
So I was sliding back and forth, reading my book, having a good time.
Were there a lot of no wind days?
We were becalmed twice, both times for about 2 days. The first time, it was on Thanksgiving Day. And at that point, George had figured out, because he didn't eat on the boat. He didn't eat very much at all. He snacked, and that was the way he sailed across. I got on the boat, I eat. He knows. I'm on a 2-hour feed now.
That's why every day you get in the rubber boat and go get food.
Yeah, exactly. So on Thanksgiving Day, we were basically becalmed. We actually made about 30 miles that day just because of the ocean current. The seas were running about 40 feet. And from crest to crest, it was somewhere between 1 and 2 miles.
Mm.
So we'd go down in this big dip, and you couldn't see anything. Water way up above you, and slowly go back up to the top, and you could look around, look for boats, looking for ocean freighters and all that kind of stuff, and then go back down in the bottom. So we spent that day, we took every bit of food that was in the boat and brought it out in the cockpit, and George made a list, and then he spent his first watch that night making a list of what we would eat each day until January 1st, 1989. And he said, we will not be on this boat past the first day of January. And he said, if we have to go someplace else, I'm going to give you the boat and you can finish it, but I'm off this boat on the first, period. So I went on this boat weighing about what I am right now, about 182, 185 pounds. I came off the boat in Florida, I weighed 165 pounds. George, you'll see a picture of him pulling his pants out. He lost a tremendous amount of weight. I'll change the head sails again. Another sunset. George organized our day so that I saw every sunset, every sunrise.
Wow.
Was you able to catch fish while you were cruising across?
No, we didn't even try.
You didn't try to fish.
No. Got a couple reefs in there, late evening. You can see that the sea is lumpy, but it's not horrible. And that's pretty much the whole crossing. Right behind the shrouds, you can see a ocean freighter going past. George fixing dinner. George fixed all the meals. I did all the cleanup.
Oh, wow. But it didn't eat.
Here we are. We must have been on starboard tack, bracing himself against the cabin, gimbaled stove, the whole thing. He was a good cook.
But he didn't eat meals.
Huh?
Just snack. He didn't eat meals, he just snacked.
No, we ate meals.
Oh, okay.
Because I was on board.
Oh, I see.
We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner
Okay.
up until Thanksgiving.
Gotcha. His normal by himself.
After Thanksgiving, we had a good breakfast. We had cheese and crackers or something like that for lunch. And then we had a small dinner, not a big dinner, a small dinner. But it was adequate. It was adequate. I didn't die. He had steps on his mast. In fact, the first time I went up that, he had just put them on Lake Arthur where I learned to sail. And I looked at him and I said, can you climb these things when it's underway? And he said, well, go up there. And I went up, and the first thing that happened, I had just got to the top of the mast, and he says, tacking. One of the things that happens when you're out on the ocean, or even if you're a cruising sailor, if you're out there for a long time, you have to check your fittings. You have to check everything on the boat. So usually what George would do is get out the binoculars and just look up there and see if everything was still attached, see if he could see any chafed lines or anything like that. This day it was fairly calm. You can see the water doesn't have a lot and not much coming off the back of the boat. So I went up there and did the inspection. I was up the mast probably 10 or 15 times during the crossing. This picture was taken the day after Thanksgiving. And I went swimming.
Oh, yeah.
In the Atlantic. The easiest way to get a bath on the boat, Joy soap is the only thing that works in ocean water. Wow. The salt. So you lather up with Joy soap and
Is that the ropes that you're relying on to get back in?
yeah, that's how I got back on. When George was coming across, he was trailing a line behind in case he fell overboard.
Yeah.
And he got to thinking about it. The boat's doing 5 knots or whatever, and I'm gonna try and catch this line and then shinny up the line and get back to the boat and climb back on the boat. And he said, no, I can't do that. There's no way I could get back on that boat by myself. And
So you were him? Yeah.
for him.
Okay.
For us, we didn't trail with the harness. Our rule was, during the day when we were both awake, we would obviously hear somebody falling overboard and yelling for help. So we had safety harnesses and jack lines and tethers. And during the day, we didn't use them. At night, it's an aft cabin, so we slept in the back of the boat. When you stood up in the aft cabin, you put your tether on, and you did not go any place on the boat at night, not tethered.
Wow.
One night, George decided that, gee, Claude seems like he's a little tired today. So he let me sleep past my 2 hours. And I woke up by myself and I looked around and I couldn't find George anywhere on that boat.
Oh.
That's not a very big boat. It's only 8 feet wide and it's only 27 feet long. How can you lose a person on that boat? Well, he had crawled up in amongst the spare sails in the salon and was buried.
Oh my.
And I couldn't find him. I panicked. I absolutely panicked. And
Yeah.
he must have heard me because I see this head pop up.
Was there always someone awake? Somebody always was watching?
Just you.
Were one of you always awake, watching?
Somebody was always awake.
Except that time. It wasn't.
The year before the crossing, George had gone from North Carolina out to Bermuda. And he was solo. And he went to sleep for a little rest. And when he came to and came up out of the back of the boat, he popped his head up into the middle of a carrier group. And
A what?
it's an eye-opener, because the carrier group is like 20 or 30 ships. How many boats in the
Well,
carrier group?
it's 79.
Uh-huh.
It just seems like that with all the guns pointed at you.
It says 7 to 9.
We said, not counting submarines, we don't talk about it.
So one of the things that we did early on in the crossing is we would look on the horizon and spot a boat, and we timed it until it was a beam. And from the time you can first see the light of a boat on the ocean, from the deck of this boat, until it's a beam, it's about 15 minutes. I had a Timex electronic watch, just a cheap waterproof watch, and I had a countdown timer, and I'd set that for 15 minutes. So night watch was go down inside and listen to music or something, and the alarm would go off, take a squeeze it to horizon, go back down, reset your timer. And you did that all night long.
How far apart?
15 minutes.
No. Wow.
So if you didn't see anything on the horizon, you knew you had about 15 minutes until it got close to you. I'm here to tell you there are boats out on the ocean that run without their lights. Synthesis was one of them. And some of the freighters did not run lights either, because we saw them come on close to us. They know we're there. We had radar, reflector, and all that stuff. It's interesting that they get to us so quick. That's the bottom of our boat after it's been in the water in the ocean
Oh.
for almost 8 months.
This is an underwater shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Put that underwater camera to good use.
That's pretty.
Boy, how did you get that? Go back, go back. How did you get that?
You're up straight. Yeah, you're up
Grab
great.
the line.
Yeah, you're just running
Went out
with
this
the
week.
wind. So how did you get that?
Huh?
Swimming in front.
He swam ahead of it. That's good swim.
Went swimming several times.
But that's, I mean, you're running wing on wing with the wind, and you swam ahead of the boat, faster than the boat, and turned around and took a picture.
Okay, so
You're good
what you
swimmer.
have to understand about this boat is it's not fast. It's a slow boat. The best day that we made was 110 nautical miles.
24 hours, I mean.
24 hours, 110 nautical miles.
Was it full keel, Claude?
Full, it's cutaway full keel.
Five
So,
miles.
so one of the things that in 1988, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have satellite phones, we didn't have all that stuff. What we had on board was a marine VHF radio, we had a shortwave radio, and we had a longwave radio. The long wave radio, we talked back to Pittsburgh every other day to a friend of his who would relay our messages on to my mother and George's wife. The shortwave radio, we talked to two different people. One out of England, a man out of England, I cannot remember his name. And his job was, he was part of the North Atlantic Maritime Mobile Net. And we would call in every day, give our lat long, give our sea state, wind state, cruise state, boat state, and he would repeat all that information back out because the boats that were over the horizon from us couldn't hear us. We also reported, a lot of the boats reported on how many miles they got during their last 24-hour run. Real boats were making, on a bad day, 150 nautical miles. They would complain bitterly, we only made 150 nautical miles. Our best day was 110. So if you take 4,000 divided by 49, you can see that we were well below 100 nautical miles a day. Then, that was the first half of the trip. The second half of the trip, we talked to a lady out of Barbados, again, in the North Atlantic Maritime Mobile Net. By that time, we were having two problems. The first problem was our batteries were getting old and we could not use the long-wave radio without running the engine. And the second one was that on the North Sea, the fuel tank is part of the bilge, built into the keel. So the top of the fuel tank is the bottom of the bilge. And his had a couple pinholes in it. So as the keel would flex, the tank would flex, and it would open and close, and it would suck seawater in. So whenever we ran the engine to charge the batteries or to talk on the radios, I had to go and stick my head in the engine compartment and watch the fuel water separator and shut the engine off before the water got into the engine, otherwise we had to bleed the engine.
Yeah.
Which we had to do because we didn't know that condition was there and we had to bleed it the first time. It happens to be a common problem with North Seas, and most North Seas get that plastic tank put in so that they don't have that problem. So one of the jobs that I learned was inverted diesel mechanic
Oh, yeah.
operations. And nothing smells better than a rolling boat and diesel.
Bilge.
So in the last part of the trip, when we were having trouble, we only talked to the lady in Barbados every other day. And every other day, she would also talk to us, even though we wouldn't reply to her. And she'd always send out their best wishes and everything to us. So between talking to Pittsburgh to George's friend Reed Joyce and the Maritime Mobile Net, we weren't alone out there. We always had somebody we could talk to. We had also did talk to some of the passing ships on the VHF radio. And they were usually really good about coming back and talking to us and things like that. George, sitting there.
Oh.
Cooking dinner again. Up on the bow. One of my favorite places to sit.
Old as fiberglass.
Night watch. So I've got on a life vest, a hoodie, long pants, 78 degrees. I have to say that that first night at sea, after we left Las Palmas, we were going along and I was on my first night watch and I was sitting there and I got to thinking about, how deep is the water? How many critters are there between me and the bottom? I'm not thinking about this anymore.
Yeah.
Life is on top of the water, not what's underneath it. If you've ever been out on the ocean and seen that ocean blue, there's nothing like it. It's so beautiful. The other thing was this first time I saw phosphorescence. The boat left these long trails that was bright. At night, it just seems so bright. It's not very bright, but it seems very bright at the time. And I would watch that for hours.
What is it? I don't understand. What was that?
Phosphorescent. There's critters that live in the ocean that when you touch them, when you interact with them, they glow. And the wake, after hitting the boat and going off on the wake, they glow this
Nice.
kind of a nifty little blue color.
It's the aurora borealis in the water.
Yeah.
I should have been what to put us, you could throw in a cherry bomb.
Heel over.
Claude, there was a,
George doing his job. Now, I think this is a series. That's what it's like, was like when we were in the trays. Just rolling back and forth like that. It was probably the only time I was really uncomfortable on the boat. Although I did notice that because on the ocean, you'll go for days on the same tack with the same wind with the same seas, and you just keep going. You don't have anything to do. The sails are set. George is doing his job. You're sitting there reading your books and squeezing for traffic, and then things change. And I never got seasick, but I would get an odd sensation when the motion changed like that. I mentioned that we were on the hook in the harbor, and George put us there intentionally. He told me about halfway across, he said, do you know why we went on the hook? I said, no. He said, I intentionally put us in the roughest place in the harbor to see if you were going to get seasick. That's how clever he was. Very, very clever. I know that seasickness is something that happens to everybody. I was fortunate enough not to have to deal with it on this crossing. There's right behind that shroud, there's a ocean freighter. There he is, we got a little closer to him. Those guys are so fast. Just one.
How fast do they go?
25 to 30.
They're probably in the 20 to 30 knot range. Some of them, I think I have a picture of one that's pretty close to us. George called it having a bone in his teeth, the bow wave.
Yeah.
It's very impressive. I mean, it's huge, absolutely huge.
How does it affect you when it gets to you? How does the wave affect you? How much?
Not at all.
What was the closest you'd say you ever passed to one of those freighters, Claude? Like, how many knots?
Probably the closest that we ever got, and you'll see it, actually see a shot of that here in a little bit, was about a mile.
That's right on top of you.
And there's a story behind that. This is the interior. You see potatoes down on the floor and all the junk and clutter and stuff. There had been a bunch of sea bags up by that louver door in the front, and that's where George hid from me that time. I know what that picture was supposed to be of. This is one of the dreary days. That shadow in the center of that picture is the pilot whale. I saw before we got into the Caribbean, the only mammals that I saw were pilot whales. We didn't see any dolphins. They're very similar in shape, but they're smaller, a lot smaller than a traditional dolphin.
But they're smaller than a dolphin? The pilot whales? Oh. Like how long would that be? Like 12 feet?
These guys visited with us for about a half an hour. They just swimming around, broaching, having a good time. You can see we're in a reach. I was using Kodak 400 speed film, and it just barely stopped that flag from fluttering, so the wind was up pretty good that day. When George ordered his boat from Lyle Hess in California, one of the conditions of the sale with Lyle was that George could participate in part of the construction of his own boat. George was a very good and fine woodworker, and again, he was an engineering psychologist. He dealt with interfacing the physical world with the human world. And in the original North Sea, their nav station did not, this one, you sit across the boat. You're looking outboard on the port side. The traditional nav station on the North Sea, you sit in a chair facing forward. And it limits the number of things that you can put in front of you for radios and things. So we have here, this is the sat nav. This is the single sideband, marine radio, and the long range, the long band. And that's where George would sit. And when George went to the factory, he said, "I'll do anything. I'll sweep the floors. I don't care. I just need to be part of the boat." When they saw that he could manipulate wood and do a good job, they let him build that nav station. That nav station later became an option for North Seas.
The North Sea that I looked at was equipped that way.
What's that?
The North Sea that I looked at was equipped that way. Not with the radios, but with that nav station.
Yeah. Just hanging out. Another sunset or sunrise. That's
UFO.
this guy. We're now someplace around the middle of the Atlantic, and along comes this bird. That's a British shearwater, and they hunt by coming down on the surface of the water. You can see that they have really long wings, and they fly along and they get right above the water and they dip the wing in the water and create a disturbance, and they watch, then they fly up and they watch to see what comes up to that disturbance, and then they pounce on it.
What was that
This
called?
guy, I think, wanted to take a break. And he wanted to land on the top of that mast so bad. And he'd come along and he's flying along and he drops his gear, gets his flaps out and comes up to that mast, and the mast just go right past. He must have done that 20 times that day. He hung out with us for the whole day. There was a period of time when we were about here, a little bit later than this, when we were cutting that diagonal across the Atlantic. We didn't see a boat, we didn't see a mammal, we didn't see a bird or a fish for about 2 weeks. All that was there was water. That was it. And that's because of the way we went across. Again, George not being a very good tour guide.
So, what do you do, just check your compass setting all the time, or what? How do you stay on track with your?
This is a good time to use. Throughout the day, well, first of all, when I first got to Las Palmas, George said, "I've got a early Christmas present for you." And he presented me with this. This is a mid-grade sextant. It works really well. It's not as good as what he bought, but it does the job. And he gave me that book. And he said, "You're going to learn to use the sextant." So for the first half of the trip, I read this book and hand-reduced sight twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. And those sights are called lines of position. So you do your sight on the sun, and you have a line of position. And then during the day, you mentally keep track of how fast you're going and what direction. And that's called your dead reckoning. And then in the evening, you take another line of position. And those two positions, you take the first one and you move it forward on your dead reckoning line. And where they cross is where you're supposed to be. Okay? And that's what these papers are. These are the actual calculations I did in learning celestial navigation by hand coming across the ocean. I don't remember any of it, but I could probably go back and recreate what I did. The closest I got to the actual sat nav lat long was 5 nautical miles. And the way we did that was George and I were sitting in the cockpit, and George was taking time, and I was making the shots. And at dusk, as the stars would pop out, we did shot, 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 okay? Then you sit down and you do the lines of position on all 5 shots. And it makes a crook tap. And that's the name of the procedure, crook tap. And you're someplace inside that crook tap. And I got what the sat nav said, I got within 5 miles. The only one that I did not master, and that was probably because we were so far south and it was so close to the winter equinox. I tried to do a noon sighting, which tells you what longitude you are on very accurately. But the sun was too far overhead to have an arc to it that I could actually see when it was actually at the arc.
Oh, I see.
Okay. I was looking too straight up at the plane of the elliptic. Okay. The sat nav, that was it, when we crossed in '88, it was at the very end of satellite navigation. And they were just starting to get into GPS. So there were only a few satellites up. Fortunately, his unit had a beeper that when it got a good signal, it would go off so we could go and see where we were at. And he did that, I did this. I never looked at that. It was fun. It's not hard. It's just a series of mathematical things that you have to do. The second half of the trip, he gave me this thing, and it's a calculator, and you just put in what astronomical whatever you're looking at, the sun, the moon, a star. You put that in here, you put in your numbers, and it crunches it, and it's a lot easier. But that can fail. Pen and paper don't fail.
Did you get closer to the sat nav readings using that? I know that you said 5 nautical miles when you did it totally manually, but when you use that in the second half, did you get closer?
That was done without them, yeah. But I could have done it, you know, by
Okay.
hand. It just, by hand, it probably takes a good half hour. At least for me, it took about a half hour to reduce the sunset. Yeah. And it was fun. It's hard being on a boat that's doing this, and you're trying to bring the bottom edge of the sun right to the horizon and get it perfect. George had a Rolex, a really nice Rolex, and we did all of my sights with my Timex. And the reason a Rolex is a very sought after chronometer is because it loses or gains the same amount of time every single day. The problem is, you have to know how many days since the last time you set it. You have to keep track of that, and you have to enter that into your calculations. I bought a simple waterproof Timex. It had a countdown timer and a couple other features. It cost me, at the time, in 1988, it probably cost me $12. My watch never gained or lost a single second. I didn't have to go through that extra step. And the way I've determined that is, when I first bought the watch, I started calling WWV, which is Quarterly Universal Time, the atomic clock in Boulder, Colorado. And I would call and wait for the minute and look at my watch and say, yep, beep happened right on that second. And I did that for 3 months.
Wow.
In 3 months, my watch did not lose a single second. The Rolex is a perfectly fine piece of equipment, and they're very valuable, and they're very accurate, but they take many extra steps in your calculations for doing sextant work and finding out where you're at. Here's the stories. One of the things that happened on our crossing, and when the sun was out, which was most of the time, see how the overhead there's no clouds, but off on the horizon, and it was like that almost every day that the sun was out for us. I don't know why it happened. Somebody had to be under those clouds, but we weren't. We had nice sunny cloudless skies most of the time. Sargasso seaweed.
That's so.
Again, overhead, no clouds, clouds on the horizon. Full main. There's a corner of our drifter. Again, no clouds overhead. That was my screensaver for a long, long time.
But that,
Pretty darn good one.
Yeah. You can see how flat the ocean is.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that picture really brings out the concept of an oily sea.
So this is very low winds, downwind.
Now, what you don't see is the spear gun that's right by his feet.
Just in case.
And again, even though we were becalmed that day, we still made 30 or 40 miles.
This is correct.
But when you got off the boat in the middle of the ocean with full sails up, did you at least have a line tied to you?
The boat wasn't moving. The only reason that boat was moving is because of the current of the ocean. I don't know if you can see it. Right there. We actually turned around for that thing.
What is it?
Yeah. And it was that. It's a lobster marker. Ooh. And there was a crab on it.
Oh.
Hitchhiker.
Huh.
Oh, you did go fishing.
So, maybe water. When it would rain, this is what we did. North Sea 27, small boat. I don't know how many gallons we left with in Las Palmas. We arrived in Florida with 1 gallon. And we collected in rainstorms probably 8 or 10 gallons. You let it rain on the sail, and you would taste the water until it wasn't salty anymore, and then you collect it and put it in your water system. Also, I did not shave the entire trip. I wasn't going to put a razor next to my neck, not on a sailboat. This is our biggest head sail. You can see we're not going very fast. So George was talking to Reed at the nav station, dot and dashing. Reed was a master ham. When I was talking to him, I owned half an airplane with Reed, and we were talking about him communicating with George, and Reed was saying that when he gets on the ham radio and dot and dashing, he doesn't hear individual letters, he hears sentences. It's just like me talking to you guys, but he hears some dots and dashes as full sentences. He's incredible. So George always had to ask him to slow down. And George would. But we got the message across. At one point, we kind of were into a little bit of weather, and my mother told me later that Reed had called her and said that they were in a little bit of weather, but there was no danger or anything like that. And my mother said, well, that's just unfortunate. We need to have that boy have every experience he can have. Even some bad weather. Kind of lumpy seas here.
I don't know, they look very, doesn't look very lumpy. It's lumpy me.
So we were going along one day, and this storm popped up off our stern. And we sailed with this guy for a whole day. And the wind coming down off the rain pushed us ahead of the storm all day long.
So were you in the rain or not?
No, we weren't in the rain. We were just getting pushed away, pushed around by it. There's a pilot well right down on that bottom edge there. They would come around and visit. George's wife at his bon voyage party said, "Why are you taking the camera?" And she said, "There's only 6 pictures you can take. You can take the front of the boat, the back of the boat, the starboard of the boat, the port of the boat, the inside of the boat, and the sky. What else is there?" Well, there's whales. And they're always a hoot to see. I was up the mast. I went up the mast and took pictures of these guys. And then it's here. I know it's here. It's fascinating.
Oh, is it?
How far, I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere there, right?
What's that?
Long ways to land where you're at just to take these pictures.
Yeah. There's not much out there. Someplace. So
Oh, yeah.
they were around long enough. I got out the duct tape. I got out the boat hook, and I taped my camera to the boat hook. I set the timer, and I'd wait until the timer was about ready, and I'd plunge it into the ocean, and I got these pictures.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Pretty impressive, bud. Pretty impressive for the time, for real.
Yes, yes.
Why did you say it was unfortunate that you took some of your best pictures with his camera? Why was that unfortunate?
We had identical cameras,
Well, yeah, but
and they were sitting next to each other on the thing, and I would every once in a while grab
he
his.
did not have access to the prints.
His film was all slides, and I didn't have the capability to switch them over at that time. And frankly, I didn't think about it. Again, I can't explain it, why we didn't have clouds overhead, and they were always on the horizon. So, one of our favorite things to do was dinner time. And George had a boom box, and we'd see a picture of it here in a little bit. And we'd get the boom box out, and we'd have our dinner. And then I had a stack of cassettes, some of them that my mother had made for me that were compilations off the radio, so that she just would record whole radio programs.
Yeah, nice.
And I would just sit at night, when I was on watch, I could listen to those and things like that. And then I had, the music that I liked, and George had the music he liked. I learned to enjoy Roy Blount Jr., classical music. He was into jazz a little bit, and things like that. And of course, I was rock and roll. But he would play a side of his tape, and I'd play a side of mine at dinner time. And it's when we would sit there and tell stories and just have a nice time. And it's because the temperature on the ocean is so consistent and very seldomly ever changes, it's always comfortable, basically. And you can see he's just got a light sweater, he would make Irish coffee about twice a week, and I accused him of trying to get rid of crew because I don't drink, and a shot of Irish whiskey and a cup of coffee was enough to get me drunk. The other thing that we did, I started it after the first week we were on the water. It was the first Sunday after we'd been on the water. And I looked at George at dinner time and I said, so what did you do last night? What do you mean? I said, well, like last night I went to the fantail and I was hitting golf balls off the back. What did you do? He said, I went to a little concert. So that became a tradition on Sundays. We would come up with what we would be doing on a tour boat or something like that. Something to lighten the mood. Some of the pictures just don't make sense. Who cares? This is one of the more boisterous days. Again, 400 film, pretty fast film, and not able to stop flying in motion. Looks like 2 reefs.
Yeah.
Taking some spray.
Mm-hmm. Pretty good deal.
I never, even in the bigger waves that we had, which were all that big, like I said, it was really an easy crossing. I never felt afraid on the boat. Never felt at odds with the ocean.
Claude, how long had you been sailing before this crossing, and what was the farthest you had sailed before this crossing?
I was asked to do this trip the summer of '87. At that point, the largest lake I'd been on was Lake Arthur, and it was about, Lake Arthur is about the size of what we can see of Honey Creek right here. So George took the boat from North Carolina out to Bermuda, and he was becalmed with insight in Bermuda. And for the life of me, I don't know why he didn't have diesel on board, but for some reason he couldn't run the engine. And it resulted in a couple of things. He bought a really long oar, and there was an oar lock on the back of the boat, and you could sweep that back and forth and propel the boat forward. And he decided then that he would do the crossing to the Azores, but he wanted people to come with him from the Azores to England, from England to Portugal, from Portugal into the Med. And his wife was with him in the Med the whole summer. And then his brother came and helped bring the boat out to the Canaries. And he asked me to do the long crossing. And I looked at him and I said, "You're crazy." I said, "I'm an inland lake sailor. I only sail little things without motors. I have no clue as to what to do on an ocean crossing." He said, "You'll be fine." And so what I did was, we had Judy and Gary, cannot remember their last name. They ran Sail Care out of Pittsburgh, and they had a middle mast 30 up on Lake Erie. So I went up and crewed for them in some races and sailed, did buoys, lake buoys, out and back. That was the first time that I was never out of sight of land, even doing those races. Then the owner of the sailboat shop that I was in, we took a Holder 20 across Erie and back without a motor. And then I signed up for crew on Island Week at Taba Island on Lake Erie, and I went out and raced around Taba Island for a week. And that's the extent of my offshore when I took this job. I've learned to sail in '83, and this happened 5 years later. And I was the right person in the right place at the right time to be at. That's it. Could have been anybody. I'll tell you that sailing on the ocean is way easier than sailing out here. It's just putting in hours. Like I said, I read 13 books, and some of them, James Michener, that thick.
A lot of time on your hands. A lot of time on your hands.
You do. You have a lot of time on your hands because basically your job is to keep your dead reckoning, look for lake or ocean freighters that might hit you, and to hang out. And I never slept any better in my life. The aft cabin on this boat is a flatbed, and then the hull curves up away, and so you sleep on the lee side. So it goes like this, and you put your sleeping bag down, and I slept like that. And about the time I closed my eyes and said sail change, and it happened a lot. I know it didn't happen every night, but it happened a lot. He was very conservative, and rightly so. That boat has to get you from the Canaries to Florida and not sink. And we did a lot of maintenance. We tore winches apart. We did diesel servicing, replaced lines, checked everything daily. It's amazing how quick salt water drying in the inside of a winch will seize it up. And how hard it is to get it apart when it does that. Blocks just get seized up. You have to watch them constantly. We spent the whole summer before he left in '88. We spent that whole summer going. All the bright work on the boat was redone down to bare wood and about 30 coats of varnish, starting with a cut of 25, P1 to 4, 1 to 3, and working up through to pure stuff. And it lasted the year out on the ocean. No visible wear at all.
Like I said, you diluted the varnish to start with, so it soaked in, and then you make
If you don't do that, varnish will just sit on top of the wood and then peel off.
That's what happens to me, for sure.
He was fortunate in the company that he owned. They had this huge warehouse space. We just pulled the boat in there and put on a coat, wait 2 days, put on a coat, wait 2 days, put on a coat, and then stand in between.
Good.
Yeah, to a certain extent, George's wife was right. There's no sense in having a camera on it. Because the camera doesn't really capture the beauty.
It does stir the memory, though.
It's what's up here. These remind me of what's up here. This is the my diary from the trip. Every couple of years, I'll start on the 4th of November and read my entries in order day by day and do the whole thing like that. Typical, this is, our typical night at dinner. I could not have picked a better guy to sail across the ocean for. He was, in the Army Air Force at the end of World War II, and switched over to the Navy for Korea, and flew fighters off the carrier. That's how he made the promise to himself. And then he switched over to the Air Force as a test pilot. Very accomplished. You can see I'm starting to get a little skinny.
Look, you don't have gray hair.
Mine's got there.
You can see my beard's pretty well growing in there. And what I am doing is we had these big bags of rice. And I am sorting out the rice from the pests that started growing in it. We needed the rice. And so I spent a day or two, spoonful by spoonful, picking out all these little black dots out of the rice.
Wasting the protein.
Yeah, you probably should have left it there, but
Choosing the less of two wiggles.
Oh,
Ouch.
just, normal day at sea.
yeah, Tyler.
It would have been a lot nicer if I had a cell phone and I could have taken movies and stuff like that. But that technology in '88 was in its infancy, and we didn't, we could have recharged batteries with the motor. The freighter way out on the horizon.
What do you got, some rain?
Several rainbows.
Did you get any of that rain?
What's that?
Did you get any of that rain?
No. This, I had 10 rolls of 36 exposures each, and I had to wait until I get to my mother's house in Detroit after the trip to find out if even one of them turned out. Talk about anxiety. So, this is what the boat looked like after a rainy day. All sorts of stuff hanging out everywhere, trying to dry it out. We both had red foul weather beer. Henry Lloyd, what great beer that stuff is. One weekend. So I believe these are pictures and shots of probably the worst weather that we had. And it's just before we got to the Caribbean. We came into the Caribbean on the Northwest Providence Channel, which is huge. You can't see land on either side, and you can't even see the channel markers. It's huge. But you have to go there because everything else is shallow. And what happened was we had a storm north of us and we had one east of us. So we had waves coming down from the north and coming in from the east. And it was making, this is called a graybeard, because the way the waves break against each other,
Yeah.
and it looks like a beard, right? And haystacks. This is a haystack right there. And two waves came together and it blossoms up like a big haystack. So we were in this for about 2 days, and we're down to triple reef, storm jib, and dragging the pole, the boom in the water.
Yeah.
And this is after I shook out a reef. So I'm sitting, it was breakfast time, and George is making breakfast, and I'm sitting in the companionway hatch, and a haystack broke right on the back of the boat. Flooded the cockpit, nothing got inside the swan or anything. And I looked at George, and I said, should I be worried? And he said, are you? And I said, no. I said, then don't be. And the thing is that because he was conservative, we had 3 reefs in there, had a storm jib up, and not that much wind, so we weren't moving, and these erratic waves just bouncing us all over the place. So I shook out reefs, I put up the working jib, and this is the result. We're heeled over enough in a run that the boom is dragging in the water.
What is
But
that?
the motion of the boat was better because it was stable.
What angle is your boom from your?
That's out almost all
I mean, it
the
looks like
time.
it's deep. Is it out of control, or are you running downwind?
Downwind.
Okay. All right.
Downwind is running out of control.
Downwind is what?
Is running out of control.
Oh.
It's not like it stayed there. I mean, it came back up.
You're getting washboard.
Yeah. Freighter that came pretty close to us. He's probably a mile and a half away. So we're in the Providence Channel. We went from seeing no boats one day to the next day seeing 27. And they're coming from every direction. They're coming into the Caribbean, and they have to go through this passage. So I'm on watch, and I'm sitting there reading my little books, and I look up, and straight back, he is right on our way.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back, and I see him coming, and he's within a mile and a half. And I said, George, I think we have a situation here. And George says, what? And I said, well, come on. George comes up and takes a look, and he says, okay. Goes down, gets on the VHF radio, and he says, this is sailing boat synthesis to the container ship on our way. And the guy comes right back, yes, synthesis, we see you out there, we know you're there, and we're just trying to figure out which way to go around you so we don't steal your wind. Oh, goodness. And so he did.
He did.
And from that first shot to this one, that boat's going along, and it goes, whoa, whoa, and it cuts around us. They can turn, they can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely amazing.
That's a lot of consideration on that ship captain's part. That was a lot of consideration on that.
It was. This is the closest any boat got to us.
So which island did y'all approach in the Caribbean?
From the time that I last saw Africa until I saw the assembly building on the coast of Florida at Cape Kennedy, I did not see a land-based island, except for in the middle of the Caribbean, I saw a few red lights on towers on the horizon. As I said, George was not a very good tour guide.
Y'all didn't come to San Juan or one up to, you entered, which channel was that?
Northwest Providence.
that in relation to like the windwards?
I'm not sure.
So it could come north of the windwards and through the Bahamas, like towards Florida?
Yeah, you'd have to look it up because
Okay.
I don't know. I know that we went in the Northwest Providence Channel, we came out around West End.
Okay.
And then shot up. We did that because we didn't want to go straight across the Gulf Stream. We wanted to use the Gulf Stream to help
Go
us.
north, right.
George's a pretty smart guy. We had a passenger, flying fish.
Yeah, I'm very happy with it.
That white thing on the horizon is a tour boat in the Caribbean.
Oh,
One morning we're sitting there and one of those boats is going past us and we were having for breakfast lobster bisque. And I said, George, I don't think those guys are eating as good as we are. We came down to the Caribbean and George was asleep. It was night. I was on watch and we were running downwind and this wind just came up all of a sudden and a lot of short steep waves and the boat was getting up on those and going down and it was ever so close to tripping. And I disconnected George and I'm hand steering and again, I lack this much of being able to brace myself. So as the tiller's getting jerked out of my hand, jerked back and forth, I'm getting slammed back and forth across this thing and I'm keeping the boat going straight, keeping it from spinning out at the bottom of these waves. It woke George up and I hear this voice come up out of the aft cabin. You all right up there? I said, oh yeah, George, yeah, I'm fine. Because I knew if he came on board, we'd be up shortening sail.
So you disconnected?
Yeah, I disconnected George.
Oh,
His hand steering.
Yeah, the hands.
Oh, George Jr. Got it.
George,
You're still on tether.
we had a little rainstorm over in the Caribbean. I believe this is the first time that we saw dolphins, and it took us from the first time we saw these guys going around West End and then coming up across the Gulf. They visited us about 10 o'clock in the morning every day. And they came and they'd hang around about a half an hour and splash and jump and twist in the air and do all sorts of antics. And just had a good time
He called it up.
shepherding us on the last of our trip.
that's cool.
And it was about this time you can see that the water's flat. When we got into the Gulf Stream, the wind went away. So we were headed north with the Gulf Stream, running the motor, and making the best time that we made on the entire trip.
Yeah.
Over the ground, we were doing almost 9 knots. And it was mostly due to the current. So off the bow there, you can see some of the Sargasso seaweed. We ran across some really big patches of that stuff. Just below the horizon, in the center, the first land-based birds that we saw, some brown pelicans, the B-52 of the bird world. It was absolutely gorgeous. So the last couple days, we spent a lot of time putting everything away, stowing everything, cleaning up everything, getting everything shipshape. This is the oar that he bought for sculling the boat in case we needed it. So in George's time in the Mediterranean, he met and talked to a lot of people, and originally he had intended to come back to the U.S. in North Carolina, but he was advised that in December, that's not a good place to be in the Atlantic, and this friend of his, who he had met, advised him to go to Cocoa Beach Yacht Club, which is right at Cape Kennedy. So, under the shrouds there's a white dot, and that's actually the first land-based item I saw in 49 days. It's the assembly building at Cape Kennedy. Coast of Florida, and the water is going to go from blue to green to brown. So our intention was to go up even with Cocoa Beach Yacht Club, with the Cape Kennedy, and make a left turn and go straight into the harbor. This is Christmas Day, and this boat, we see it come out of where we're going. It comes out and he sails across our bow and turns around and is sailing back. And as he's sailing back, he sees our Q flag up, which is the customs flag. And so he sails over alongside of us and he says, where are you guys coming from? Awesome. Almost in the Canaries. Okay. Where are you going? We say Cocoa Beach Yacht Club. Oh, well, I'm from the Cocoa Beach Yacht Club. I'll show you how to get there. And the guy says, by the way, do you know, and I cannot remember the guy's name, but do you know this guy? And George says, yeah, he's the one that told us to come here. So we follow this guy into the channel.
Joe Williams.
We're putting away our sails, getting ready to go in. That's one of the boats that they used on when they launch rockets from Cape Kennedy. They go out there and secure the area. There's in the center of the picture is a barge balloon. They send those up. They have radar on them, and they use them for clearing the area in when they launch missiles or rockets. And they also use them for drug interdiction. And George warned me not to say a word about drugs on the boat in case they were listening. We didn't get arrested. Some fishing boats. And we're greeted by a sailing boat.
That's Florida. That's Florida. That's Florida. Sunken boats, Florida.
So I handed my camera to a guy that was on the dock, and he took this picture of us. We had not yet stepped foot on land. It was, according to my calculations, 49 days, 6.5 hours. This walkway, George explained, this walkway about 6 feet wide, and it was all George could do not to fall into the water.
Wow.
You can see George lost a little bit of weight. George went up, when you come in and have to go to customs, the captain is allowed off the boat. The crew has to stay on board. So George went up and made the phone call to customs. And the custom guy started to ask questions of him. He said, okay, where are you coming from? Las Palmas. How long were you at sea? 49 days. Do you have any fruit and vegetables? Hell, you wouldn't have any fruit and vegetables. He said, how many crew are on board? One. I said, where is he? He said, he's on the boat. He said, hang this phone up right now and go get that guy off that boat. So we pulled in to Cocoa Beach Yacht Club on December 25th. They were having their Christmas party. And they graciously welcomed us. We had cookies and sweets for the first time in, God, a long time. They were very nice, and the Commodore, a lady, walked over to George and I at one point, and she said, I'm going to give you a Christmas present. She said, here's the key to the men's shower. And we have lots of hot water. Lots of hot water.
I guess she was selling you something.
So at the end of every great expedition, you have to clean up your mess. And so we spent a couple days at Cocoa Beach just boxing stuff up and getting stuff sorted out and ready for the trip home. It was a disaster inside. George's brother brought George's truck and trailer down from Pittsburgh, and we loaded the boat on the trailer.
Is that an F-150?
What's that?
Is that an F-150? F-250?
No, it's a 250. Ford 250 diesel. And
Oh, wow.
we left Florida in nice sunny weather, and we arrived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In a blizzard.
Oh, yeah.
Towing a boat up a mountain.
What do you expect at Christmas?
Actually,
Doesn't
by
look too
this
bad.
time, I think it's the 2nd of January. And this is George's backyard where the boat was kept for a long time. I got a beard, I got long hair, sunglasses.
Look like a hippie. Look like Aaron.
The guy on the right, George had been messing around with dots and dashes one night and ran across this fellow, and we would talk to him quite often during the last half of the trip. And I can't remember where he's from, but he helped when he heard about when we were going to be at the yacht club to finish the trip. He shows up and came, and we met him and shared stories and stuff. He's also a sailor.
Claude,
Yeah.
I don't want to give away your age, but how old was George and how old were you
He was
on this
60,
crossing?
He was 60 and I was 39.